So again, my name is Rob Lowe, also known sometimes as Supermundane, not to my face very much, and I'm going to, there's a lot in this talk, and I'm going to rattle through it. I'm going to begin with what my head's like at the moment, what I'm thinking, a bit of a manifesto, then we'll have a whole history, and then I'll come back to what I'm doing now, like a circle of life. So come with me on this journey. So at the moment, I've been trying to do work under this idea, which is, it's not a very good acronym, it's GIAYG, which is GIAYG, which stands for Give It All You've Got. It's going to be one of those kind of talks. And that's Give It All You've Got, if you're wondering. And by that I don't mean like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, whatever that horrible phrase means, but I mean just access everything that you've got, all the things you love, and all the things that you, all the skills you have, and also the things that you're not skilled at. But I feel like creativity is being undermined at the moment. We're being attacked on all sides. So I've got a lot of history. I can do lots of different things. I want to push back against it. So this is a kind of memo manifesto that I've written, and I'll read you that now, and that will give us some context. So here we go. So in a time of instant slickness and bland, veneer-thin generated graphics, we need more depth, more surprises, more humanity, layering of meaning, hidden and overt, multiple influences, nonsensical nuance, giving it all we've got. Clashing of styles and interests, community collaboration, joy in generosity, contagious enthusiasm, leading by example, ravaging your past for forgotten treasure, willfully throwing yourself into the amateur, making the unpredictable that even you don't fully understand, being open to serendipity, open to changes in direction, making for small audiences, making it personal, making it for self. Everything doesn't have to be for everyone. A return to excitement and detail and differences, reclaiming oddity as a radical act with purpose, trusting in the sophistication of people to understand, and layers, 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 layers. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about at the moment. If you haven't noticed, we're in a bit of a destabilizing period of change. That's change. And the only constant is life's change. The ridiculously named, I can't say his name without sounding rude, but he was from 500 BCE, and change is unsettling, but it's necessary. And I don't like change very much, but hey, it does happen. And the biggest change we have at the moment is, I'm not going to talk about it very much, or I like to pronounce AI. Because I feel kind of bored and bullied by it, really. And I also think the term AI is too vast. It covers too much ground. So when I'm talking about it, I'm obviously talking about generative AI, which I think could be renamed the terrible slickness. That's my, which kind of gives this kind of sickly feeling I feel when something's been made that no human eyeballs or ears or hands have been anywhere near. I've been reading this book by Marshall McLuhan and Quentin Fure. It's not that good, actually, but there's another one by them called The Medium is the Massage, which is brilliant. But in this, there's one bit that stood out to me, which he said that Hieronymus Bosch, the painter, his horror pictures are a faithful artistic report of the pain and misery that result from new technology, which I can't find anybody else who said this. He actually thought that, but what he's talking about is his response to the printing press. And I quite like the idea that I found this is one of his horror paintings. It starts off everything on fire and then gets even worse. So, and if this was to do with AI, then maybe I'm this fella down here, cowering in the corner, looking out with one eye. I'm not this person over here, but, kissing a pig dressed as a nun. Anyway, so I'm quite optimistic. I'm not optimistic. I'm an optimistic pessimist, which means I think everything's going to go badly. I mean, it all ends not well for all of us, unless you might not know that. So this isn't the right emoji. It's the only one I could find. I think that's crying at nice things, isn't it? But anyway, so I personally, I think, I am going to have fun trying to carry on my life, but I think it's better being an optimistic pessimist than the other way around, thinking everything is always going to turn out well and being constantly disappointed because it doesn't. So I've been looking back to look forward. I didn't really, that's quite like a 70s kids thing, isn't it? I didn't think that. Anyway, so I have been doing this. Oh no, sorry, the past is a useful place. I know the past can be scary sometimes because it contains all the horrors of humanity. But it also contains all the good stuff as well. And I think if we don't look at the past, then we are in danger of repeating it. Personally, I mean, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about nostalgia and how nostalgia leads to fascism, which seems a bit extreme, but I'm not looking back just to recreate what I've done. I'm trying to look back in order to go forward. So I'm in my 4th decade. I know I don't look like it. So it's the 4th decade I've been working creatively. If you count my time at college, it's I'm in the latter half of this 4th decade. So this is me in 1982. I've got a knockoff T-shirt from the market that says Black Sabbath in blood, and I'm 11 now, I think. And I think at this point, I was probably, without knowing it, I was getting all the stuff that I was going to be, all the kind of influences. So I was into calligraphy at that point, bird watching, dodgy fantasy art, and Iron Maiden, and so I was into heavy metal, and a lot of the covers were illustrated. And they all had quite logos that I'd copy and spend a lot of time with. I was also, as Ozzy Osbourne, with what's meant to be blood or something. It looks like jam in his mouth, and so all these things were going into my brain, and these were like 12-inch records, and I'm not tall now, but I was tiny then. Mad Magazine, which was a satirical magazine, Monty Python, and these are the young ones, and all this stuff was kind of going into that little man and coming out somewhere. And this is me at 16, just before I went to college. I didn't know what graphic design was. I went to do a national diploma in graphic design. I applied for a YTS, which was like a youth training scheme, and luckily a lovely man called Ian Lawrence said, "Don't do that. Do this other course if you can." And so I did. And at that point, we didn't have computers at all. It was in Burton-on-Trent. And so a lot of these things on here I still use, but a couple of them, I don't know what they are. But we did use Letraset a lot, and we all had drawing boards. And I was doing artworking on drawing boards. And then I did a HND in Middlesbrough. We had about 2 of these little cuties. But we didn't use them to artwork, we just used them to create little things. But the best bit about Middlesbrough was the library there, and it was stocked in the late 60s. And nobody really took that much interest in it, but me and a couple of friends would go there and spend a lot of time there and found lots of books. I've noticed that actually there's the people I'm talking about are on the wall there. So there's Paul Rand's Thoughts on Design, there's Wim Crowell's No Alphabet, and Herbleballin, who nobody was interested in at this time. This was 1991 or something like that. And all these things were very influential to me. Letterer books, there's 4 of these, and these are amazing. So I was just finding all this stuff that nobody was taking any interest in. So over these 4 decades, I've been a graphic designer, typographer, editorial designer, illustrator, artist, and writer. My first job out of college was in a kettle factory called Hayden, doing packaging for them, which is where I found the term supermundane. They had a dictionary that I'd read out of boredom, and I found supermundane, which means superior to earthly things. It doesn't mean really boring, which people think it does. And so it's been very useful to me, like this kind of double meaning. A lot of what I do has double meanings and stuff like that. And then I moved, in April this year, I moved to London 30 years ago to work for Mathmos in 1996, the people who invented the lava lamp, which is a very 90s company to move to London for. And this is me in the basement near the toilet on Drury Lane where we used to work. That's my mate Dave, who I met at college. And he's now the head of design at Ogilvy Worldwide. We've gone on very different paths. I live in a rented studio flat. Anyway, but that was me. Yeah, we had a lot of fun there. It was 1996, and in 1999 we designed their website. It was the beginning of websites, and I don't have any pictures of the websites at all. It's all gone. But we won a Design Week Award. We won a Yellow Award. We were in the D&AD book. And there was, at the time, it's a little bit now that nobody knows nobody knows anything about it. So people were charging a lot of money to do websites. And there's a company called Deepend who'd done a website for the new Volkswagen Beetle. But we came along, just two of us, little scrappy, doing lots of 2-frame GIF animations and silly stuff, and we beat them, and they didn't know who the hell we were. Well, then I got made redundant with one of my first, because everybody who wanted a lava lamp had one. I ended up going to Ministry of Sound. I didn't like the music, but I designed the crown on there, and I was doing dodgy like compilation albums. But it gave me at this point, hadn't worked under any creative direction, so I was a bit feral, and I had a creative director here, and he kind of like made me a little bit better at typography and stuff, not lettering, but actual typography, but I kept on pushing back against him. But things like these, I would design the type from scratch, because it was any opportunity to do that. And at the same time, as I moved down to London, I started doing sketchbooks, which I hadn't done for years. And I was playing around with stuff, having thought, thinking about things, doing these drawings, still playing around with typography, which is something that goes through my whole career, designing typefaces. So this was done in probably 1998, something like that. And this was a very 90s one, which I've got a whole story about Eric speaking about. It's too long. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff I was doing just in my spare time, nothing to do with actually my job. And finally, I got it in 2000. I registered the name Supermundane as a website, and the one on the left is my first ever homepage. And at the time, the websites were very computery. They weren't very. They definitely didn't look like that. So it kind of looked different to everything else was going on. I got offered a 10-page feature in a magazine called Archetype, which was in Hollywood. And I didn't have anything. I just had sketchbooks, so I just put all this stuff together, sent it over. But then people picked it up. Just the West Coast America started picking up on it, and I started getting commissions from skateboard brands. But I was still working at Ministry of Sound until I got a call from a magazine called Sleaze Nation, and they were going to rebrand it as Sleaze. And they got in touch with me saying, "Oh, we really like what you're doing at Supermundane. You can come here and do that, and we'll pay you." And I was like, "Okay, this seems like an opportunity." I was the senior designer at AMP, which was the name of the design company within Ministry. So I took a pay cut, went there, and after 4 issues, it went bust. So I was out of a job again. But before that happened, they took this photograph of me and put it in the last issue. It was photographed by a photographer called Udo Titz. That's actually his name. It looks weird anyway, but if you look closer, my wrists are shaved. That was, and it was the summer as well. And it took a long time for them to grow back properly. Anyway, so then, unbeknownst to me, they were going to offer me the job of being creative director of Sleaze, because I was doing all the work and the creative director was doing nothing. But that went. So I ended up doing a magazine called Good for Nothing. At this point, magazines were crumbling. The face had been gone bust. The whole thing was, people were panicking. So we decided to do a free London magazine called Good for Nothing. See what we did there. And then I wanted it to be quite, kind of feminine, and it's all kind of nice in its design, because all the stuff inside was quite caustic. And it was the first time that I did everything from scratch. So everything was hand. I got my watercolors out, and I did typefaces that were changed for every issue. And I designed a typeface for the front section. And then that lasted 8 issues, so I was out of a job again. Finally, I met somebody who knew how to run a business, kind of. There was a magazine, it's a children's magazine called Anorak, a woman called Cathy O'Madillis, who used to work at the Face, and was a friend of a friend, said she wanted to do a kids magazine, like a unisex kids magazine for creative kids. And we met up and we went, let's just do it. And we just did it with that, and that was it. We didn't really think about it more than that. So I did all the covers, commissioned people as well. And each issue had a different theme. So there was joke theme and can't remember, drawing. And inside, this was over 20 years ago, so there wasn't any magazines around that looked like this. And even for kids, we were putting a lot of effort in. I was designing type for it just because I could, just because I had the space to do this. And that's a double page spread about colour. And then, I was really enjoying myself. So inside, it was I would commission people to do stories. Some of them were people I knew, like Rob Ryan and Harriet Russell. and I think Rob Flowers is in here as well. But I would design, but then there was other people that we gave the first opportunity, and it's still going. I got kicked off it again. It's nothing to do with me. I'm lovely to be worked with, but they were struggling a bit for money. But it's still going, and it's still an opportunity for illustrators to get kind of a first job where you get freedom to do like 6 pages of a story. And that's the thing about chocolate. And at the same time I was doing that, I ended up doing another magazine called Fire and Knives, which was a food quarterly, which was run by a guy called Tim Hayward. And he was the editor and the publisher. He didn't know, he'd never done a magazine before. And so he just gave me all the words. And then 3 weeks later, I gave him back a magazine. We didn't talk in between. And then he'd just do a bit of copy editing. But it meant I could play around with lettering. This is covers I designed. And before at a time, that one year I just got a load of vintage tea towels and scanned them in. But I was playing around with type. I used it as a space to do hand lettering, and there'd be like 18 stories in each one, and I'd go through the flat pan and do all the ones that I thought I had an idea for, and then there was always a few at the end where I'd struggle. Yes, this is like so I kind of, the inside is very colourful. In each article I used a different coloured border, which is something I imagine some graphic designers couldn't stand, but I enjoyed. The idea for me was that almost like it was made of lots of pamphlets, and you could dip in and out. Because there was no photography or anything else, I did everything for it, and it was quite an intense project. It's still going on. Anyway, so yeah, I would illustrate each tile page and just join myself. That was something about sea urchins, which are gonads if you're eating sea urchins. And then Ronald McDonald, it looks like he's got his head on a spike, but it's just his front of his top. It was just serendipitous that happened. Anyway, in 2012 or something like that, Tim Hayward got a book deal, so he stopped Fire Knives. I'd been kicked off Anorak. I'd spent 10 years doing magazines, and then suddenly I had no work at all. But I'd been doing all through the time I was doing that. I'd been doing exhibitions and commissions using this style, which was like a organic drawing style that I'd been working on, which is all these little faces in there. And this became a thing that I was known for. I'd do installations as well. That's the record cover where I wrote everything inside. So this was something that was going on all in, as well as the magazines. I did a whole alphabet, but I got to the point where I felt very stuck with this. I couldn't progress it. Every time I changed anything, it was worse. So I started to look at how I built these things and how the lines interacted, because everything was flat. There was no perspective, but they still had loads of movement and depth. And so I was literally looking at how the lines interacted. And then I ended up here, which feels like a long way from there, but it's basically the same way it's built. But this was about 2009. And once I'd done that, I was like, okay, I can imagine this now. I can see this could lead like really anywhere. And so for the past, so then I had an exhibition. I'd hit 40, and there was a lovely little gallery called Chemistry, which got people like Jeff Lefetridge and Yoko Land and Andy Burrow had exhibitions at. And so nobody had seen any of this, so they'd only known my work at Anorak and the organic drawings. So this was quite a surprise, but it went down really well. That was the tape drawing on the wall. Yeah. And so from 2012 on, I've been using, this is kind of my kit, like that circle, square, 90-degree line, 45-degree line. And this is a little video of the kind of things I've made with that since then. yes, that's the kind of thing I've been doing for the last 15 years or whatever. And now, this is a little weird bit in the middle of the talk, really. This is a book called Song for Today, that I did in 2020. I wrote it in 2019, and it is literally just a list of troubles. And then as I released it, published it out to the world, COVID happened, and it was like, oh, we've just got one big trouble, and this is a whole book of them. But then I started putting it out, and I started singing it in talks. It's quite intense. And then I stopped, and then I was I've only got a couple of copies of this, and I was looking through it, and I thought, actually, nothing has changed. So I'm going to subject you to it. It's probably about, I'm going to say 3 to 4 minutes long, and it's literally just list of troubles. If you have the feeling that you want to clap, don't, because you won't be able to keep it going, and then it'll be worse, because it'll just be weird, and the clapping will stop, and I'll feel weird. In the book, it's got my face is in it if you flick through it. But this is just a nice screen of kind of calming whilst I sing. There's a point where I and you will think it's not going to end. It will end. I promise you it will end. And then we'll go back to the work. Well, this is work. That's the, right. So, I'm troubled by positivity, I'm troubled by inactivity, I'm troubled by too much TV, troubled by North Korea, I'm troubled by irrational fears, I'm troubled by love of beer, I'm troubled by work, I'm troubled by no work, I'm troubled by algorithms, I'm troubled by full prisons, I'm troubled by bad decisions, I'm troubled by people I've never met, I'm troubled by things I regret, I'm troubled by stuff I'll forget, I'm troubled by AI, I'm troubled by AR, I'm troubled by the rising tensions, I'm troubled by the lack of a pension, I'm troubled by things I'll not mention, I'm troubled by surveillance, I'm troubled by violence, I'm troubled by a lack of sense, I'm troubled by guns, I'm troubled by fashion, I'm troubled by optimism, I'm troubled by populism, I'm troubled by racism, I'm troubled by nationalism, I'm troubled by nihilism, I'm troubled by all the isms, I'm troubled by false updating, I'm troubled by online dating, I'm troubled by ducks mating. If you've ever seen The Mate, it's disgusting. I'm troubled by the email. I'm troubled by the Daily Mail. I'm troubled by pornography. I'm troubled by the rising sea. I'm troubled by being free. I'm troubled by how often I wake. I'm troubled by nature. I'm troubled by failure. I'm troubled by cancer. I'm troubled by fanatics. I'm troubled by mathematics. I'm troubled by tons of plastics. I'm troubled by lies. I'm troubled by truth. I'm troubled by impending death. I'm troubled by drawing my last breath. I'm troubled by the bereft. I'm troubled by politics. I'm troubled by workaholics. I'm troubled by manly pricks. I'm troubled by confrontation. I'm troubled by dehydration. I'm troubled by deforestation. I'm troubled by pains. I'm troubled by weight gain. I'm troubled by the powerful. I'm troubled by the hateful. I'm troubled by the amoral. I'm troubled by a Donald. I'm troubled by fascists. I'm troubled by statistics. I'm troubled by inequality. I'm troubled by individuality. I'm troubled by the dying bees. I'm troubled by anxiety. I'm troubled by oil from palm trees. I'm troubled by what you think of me. I'm troubled by the ringing phone. I'm troubled by those that always moan. I'm troubled by lying politicians. I'm troubled by cruel derision. I'm troubled by circumcision. I'm troubled by the religion. I'm troubled by the sun. I'm troubled by those sapping my fun. I'm troubled by sense of cruelty. I'm troubled by what will be will be. I'm troubled by quantum theory. I'm troubled by becoming irrelevant. I'm troubled by that text I've sent. I'm troubled by the 1%. I'm troubled by love. I'm troubled by hate. I'm troubled by torture. I'm troubled by desire. I'm troubled by raging fires. I'm troubled by the universe. I'm troubled by things getting worse. I'm troubled by rhyming verse. I'm troubled by the left, right? I'm troubled by the left. I'm troubled by fake news. I'm troubled by real news. I'm troubled by man-made rules. I'm troubled by the future. I'm troubled by my posture. I'm troubled by those still wearing fur. I'm troubled by the past. I'm troubled by timing to going too fast. I'm troubled by responsibilities. I'm troubled by insincerities. I'm troubled by the grammar police. I'm troubled by global warfare. I'm troubled by my ear hair. I'm troubled by people who don't care. I'm troubled by flag waving. I'm troubled by pitchfork waving. I'm troubled by homelessness. I'm troubled by my shyness. I'm troubled by low-level stress. I'm troubled by global warming. I'm troubled by not heeding warnings. I'm troubled by my snoring. I'm troubled by the rat race. I'm troubled by the human race. I'm troubled by making waste. I'm troubled by exclusivity. I'm troubled by inclusivity. I'm troubled by just being me. I'm troubled by phone addiction. I'm troubled by Western pollution. I'm troubled by indignation. I'm troubled by forced fun. I'm troubled by cancellation. I'm troubled by having too much stuff. I'm troubled by how I'm not doing enough. I'm troubled by just not being tough. I'm troubled by social media. I'm troubled by press hysteria. I'm troubled by getting tearier. I'm troubled by overconfident. I'm troubled by clairvoyance. I'm troubled by those that never dance. I'm troubled by the rising debt. I'm troubled by carbon that's offset. I'm troubled by the internet. I'm troubled by everything. I'm troubled by nothing. I'm troubled by the song. I'm troubled it's going on and 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 on. And done, 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 etc. And that's what my life's like. Oh, and yeah, so this is a little tiny video that I only show in my talks because Instagram doesn't deserve it. It's one of the best things I've ever done. I can shut up for half a minute. There you go, that's it. It's one of the best things I've ever made. So, what's next? So that all that stuff I've shown you, and all the other stuff, has been, up until about 2 years ago. Thinking about some of the things I mentioned in the manifesto thing, like community collaboration, joy and generosity, contagious enthusiasm, leading by example. I was thinking about how I can do that in terms of how I approach work and how you can kind of decenter yourself as the kind of hero artist. One of the projects I've done that does this is up in Aberdeen for Catherine Street Community Centre, where I work with this really nice artist group called Stack, and they did all these workshops with the kids and then sent me all the results of it, and then I made an artwork from it. And it was the first time I'd ever used other people's work within my work. And so everything apart from the framework is by the kids. And I went in and found things. I obviously kind of rationalized it a bit, but it meant that it still looks like my work, but actually everything in there is by the children. And I was a little bit, it felt, when they first asked me, I thought, well, wasn't there someone from Scotland or Aberdeen doing this? Because it's a bit weird, I'm coming up from London. But then I saw myself as a kind of filter that give them back what, so I don't know whether somebody from Aberdeen, for example, may have used this picture of this block of flats, maybe but where I thought, I'll use that because the kids obviously taking a photograph of it, then maybe they live there. It wasn't until I went up to see it in situ that I realized it was very much very close to what was going on. So that's the picture. And there's the actual thing. So it's a very much a site-specific piece in the end. And then it went on. That isn't a black and white photograph. That's how grey Aberdeen is, and I haven't photoshopped there. But that's the one way. So it was the first time I realised I could do workshops with kids, but also make work that still feels like mine, but it is still very much their work as well. And then I went up and met some of the children, and they just bullied me maybe, and and another example of that is this is near where I live, and where I live on this street, which is like an artist muse in Forest Hill, and we have we have open studios, and somebody came and said, we've got this wall not far from here, do you want to do a mural? And I was like, I don't really do domestic jobs because they're a pain, but it was street facing, and I was like, well, if we can make it into a community project, then I'm interested. So I went and said, let's do it. And then they came up with a word. They came up with smile. I said, well, that's okay. I can handle that because it's a small word. This is an example of how I plan murals, paint, which is, I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but it's the only way I know how. But then I thought the word smile can be used a bit passive aggressively, especially towards women. So I wanted to kind of think of what it meant. So I wrote this little poem, which is Light Beam. A stranger's smile, full of unexpected light, slow to dissipate, warming long after the beam has gone. So it's more about receiving a smile rather than telling someone to cheer up. And so, we invited the neighbours to paint, and then the people who asked me set up a little pop-up print shop. So it actually ended up making money out of it, but not in a kind of creepy way. But the wall was very roughly rendered. So I do my murals using tape, and it just wouldn't stick to the wall. This is my friend Mary, who just popped along to say hello, and then I got her to help me. And it was a really hot day, and there was no shade, and every time we put stuff up, it would fall off. So the idea was I was going to take the whole design out, and then the next day they'd come and paint it in. But when they actually turned up the next day, we'd done just not much more than that. So I just dotted where the colours went and just let them get on with it. And then it was quite chaotic, to be fair. But we had about 100 people come through. It rained, obviously, because it was boiling hot one day, the rain in, and the sun came out. But this gives a bit of an idea of what it was like. Which was just chaos. And I was just thinking, this is going to be a mess. It's going to take me days to tidy it all up. But it actually came out really well, and it was a kind of lesson in trusting the process. So I was amazed actually how well the end result was. But again, this meant that they ended up with a professional mural, but all the street was involved in this. They had an ownership over it. So this is another way. I thought, well, another way of getting people involved, but not undermining the end result. And then about 2 months later, they sent me a message saying, "Oh, it's been graffiti." And I was like, "Okay." But then just immediately after that, they went, and they'd already painted over it. And I thought, well, if I'd have done that myself, if I'd have just gone in as the artist and painted it all, I don't think they'd had the confidence to do that. But because they literally painted it, they did. And that was it was the beginnings of a kind of, this could be a way of approaching community work. And just if you want to know, the tape I use, because people are always interested, is Tessa, Precision, and the thing called masking tape for curves, because people always ask. And I tape out the whole design on the colour that the outline's going to be, paint all the colour in, remove the tape, that's it. And then another thing that I've done, so another approach to kind of decentering you as the hero artist is, during lockdown, I decided to do a colouring in project, and this is kind of doing something and then letting it have another life after you've made it. So I had a wall which I could put 36 A4 blank pieces of paper on, and I decided, I live in front of a nursery which drives me insane, like properly, and it was obviously like lockdown happened and then it was quiet. So I thought, well, they're all at home now, so I'll make. I decided to do this colouring in thing. And so I literally started in the one corner with no plan. And the idea was that you will end up with a whole big kind of colouring in mural. And each day I would do a new one. It gave me something that didn't require like any big thought, but it gave me some focus each day. And I'd send an email. People could get on the mailing list, and I'd write a little thing. And so people were waiting for these each day for 36 days. And so this is what it ended up like. It ended up being like one of the biggest things I've ever actually put together. It just goes on and on. But there was no plan at all. I didn't think about it when I started it. But then it started to be picked up online. I had like the kids started to get involved. There was adults did it. I had a hashtag. Nobody does that anymore, do they? But it looks like it says super colouring gin, but it was super colouring in. And then it was this kind of thing where that once it's out there, you just have to let people do what they want, and people use colours that I would never. I mean, I love these colours, but I wouldn't use them. And it was just very interesting to have this whole second life to something that I did this one bit, but then it goes off and becomes something completely different. And I really like these colours. Again, they're not my kind of colours, but I love them. And that's my favourite photograph of the whole thing. So in all the stuff I do, so yeah, I like these community things, but also I want to be able to work on big projects, small projects, and things like that. I don't know if I could have stayed as a graphic designer. I could have stayed, done like my mate Dave did and become head of design. I would have had a nervous breakdown if I did that, but I still want to be able to do anything I want on a daily basis. So like the biggest project I've done, I did the image for the Champions League a couple of years ago when it was in London, the final. This was what they had for another couple of the finals. I designed like a shape that was a bit like London, and all these different aspects to it that meant something to me, but also a few highlights were in London. And then I had to use their colours, which were these dark blues, and then I could pick one extra colour. And I'd been reading about how London was technically a forest because it's got 8 million trees. So I thought I'd put green in. But they're not really my kind of colours. And luckily for me, the UEFA actually said it's missing something. So they went, I've actually got these colours, pink and stuff, they're hidden away from me. And so I came back and they let me put them all in there. And this is what it ended up like. So it was quite different to all the stuff that anybody else had done. And I don't like football, so I didn't know anything about it. And I was just put on a list to get this job. I didn't have to pitch for it or anything. But it started to appear all over London. So for a week, everywhere I went, it was just kind of quite overwhelming, really. I didn't really know how to deal with it. This is Regent Street, which, that's Wembley, but Regent Street was closed, and I was around with some friends, and we were just wandering around going, I couldn't really get my head around it. That's my favourite photograph. It looks a bit Third Reich-y, but that is Regent Street. And then I like to do small things. So this is a little book that I print out. I staple together. That's me. Obviously, I stick it's all hand lettered. It's stamped. On the other side is the sadness of things. And I'm kind of obsessed with this. This is a kid's print camera. So this is what I'm using it a lot. There you go. And then if you remember the list of things I had, at the bottom of the list was writer, and it's taken me a long time to be able to call myself a writer. It took me a very long time to call myself an artist. But a couple of years ago, I published this book called Lost Ordinary Magic, just self-published, printed 100 and put them out into the world. They were just about little normal things looked at from a slightly different, my perspective. But then a person who bought it happened to the deputy managing director of Little Brown Book Publishers, and then got in touch and said, would you like us to do a hard copy of it, a hardback copy of it, which is what ended up. But when they first got in touch, I was like, I don't really know. You're like a really big, like a massive company. Why are you what do you think you've got? And I had a meeting with them and said, if I was going to go to somebody to get it published, I wouldn't have come to you. But then I chatted to friends and I said, actually, I should do this because I might not get another opportunity. So the book itself, the title comes from a Leonard Cohen book called Beautiful Losers, and it's a bit in the book about the main protagonist has got constipation, and the Lost Ordinary Magic is going to the toilet, I guess. Anyway, but the book itself is just full of these small things. It was kind of the antithesis of what was going on in the world, and trying to show that actually everywhere around us is wonderful. It goes back to the idea of supermundane, really. But now I can legitimately say that I'm a writer. But some of them are just very small. I can't even read that. It says, I still don't really understand how reflection work. How can a puddle contain the sky? I mean, I could look it up, but I don't want to. And that's my favourite one, just doing nothing. So writing gives me a place to express ideas, not obviously covered by my visual work. So I'm thinking all the time and looking around, and not everything goes into my visual work, but I want to be able to express different things. I've been working this last year on a new book called Logos for an Unknown Future, which came from an idea 10 years ago, which I'd been doing these forms that looked a bit like logos. So I made up companies or organizations to go with it. And it was this time last year that I was coming back from a talk in Glasgow, and it occurred to me I could write stories all based in the same universe of people using these services, whatever. So there's things like randomized town planning, which is a village of buildings on wheels that change around once a week because they've all got driverless cars, so nobody needs to know where anything is anymore. UU, which is a clone introduction service, which introduces you to you. History of the physical art of paper, and then Weeping Station, somewhere to go to weep in public, which I think was, well, it's not a bad idea, and Ludic Life Living. So I'm experimenting with new things and trying out new ways of working. I had a show fairly recently called Kin, which I was approached to have the show in Hackney, and I'd been working on all these different styles, and I said, can I just show everything? Because I just want to see how it works together. And so I confusingly called it a solo group show. And I've got loads of nicknames for some reason, probably for the lack of respect. But so I had them all on there. So it's Rob, Bob, Bobble, Bobstar, Robe, Rib, Bert, Bertie, Loey, Loafer, Bobalong, Bobbit, El Bobo, Robert, Robbie, Roberto, Robert, Little Rob, Bobs, Super Rob Lowe, aka Supermundane, just to make it even more confusing. So I've been doing, this is probably as close to my older work, my geometric work. These are improvised drawings that I've been doing on Instagram, really. And it kind of shows how my mind works when I'm producing these things. So I produce a line, react to that. And in this case, there's a pencil and a white pencil. And it's about creating things that link up together and harmonize, but also you can look through things that these things could be huge structures, but they're also just these thin lines. So yeah, but I don't do any editing to this. It just shows. I'll just speed it up. I'm not that fast. But these are kind of examples of those. So I had a whole grid of those, about 20 or 25 of those. But then around the same time, I'd started doing these flourish drawings. I don't know why, maybe self-care, I have no idea. But I like them, I like where they were going, but they didn't really feel very finished. So I went back and bought myself a calligraphy pen, but if you remember from the beginning, I used to do calligraphy, and started to doing these drawings, and they got better and better. And then they ended up here, and it's feel different to my geometric work, but it has all the elements I like, which is movement, flatness, but implied depth, repetition, and minimalism. So I ended up screen printing them on different colours and having a wall of these. Somebody said it was like a wall of colour theory, because there wasn't that many different colours, but it felt like there was lots of different colours. And then I got these are French curves, which I had to have when I was at college. And I got these out. So I was thinking, I use templates all the time, so maybe I could do something with no straight lines. And these kind of strange birds came out of it, slightly horrific, which reminded me, I don't know if you know pigeon fanciers. This was like, this is like a symbol of what's wrong with the human, well, men really. They breed in false and then have prices. Anyway, that was the starting point, but I started, again, these were improvised. And then I picked the ones that I liked and ended up colouring them on the computer. So even though these feel constructed and feel quite different to my geometry work, these feel very similar, I think, to the organic lines, but these were all using a template. And then they didn't have a name, so I had a little competition to get names. So they were called Gladys, Petunia, Theolonus, and that little fellow at the end was called Keith, because his course is called Keith. Am I going on? I have no idea what time it is. Yeah, well, you're stuck here. There's nothing else to do. I'm going. So I really like poetry. I think poetry is very important. It's one of the few arts that's still undermined as a thing. And I'm in a little poetry group, so I write poetry. I've got a little poetry book, and it's another way of showing this stuff's much more about history and another way of looking. But the way I construct these things still feels like how I make the geometric stuff, which is adding and taking away lines, and obviously poems are made of lines too. So this is a poem about a bath mat, obviously, called Pop, Pop, Pop. Matey, the bubble bath sailor, looks on wearing a benign smile and orange rosy cheeks, too hot water prepared with boats of war, a foretelling of a sibling battle soon to commence. Brothers, sporting foamy beards, monstrously out-of-scale action men splash bomb boats, water breaching the tub. Nan briefly appears in a synthetic striped tabard to roughly flannel our unwilling faces, leaving us shell-shocked, red and raw. Finally, fingertips wrinkled, water cooled, we pull the plug, watch the level drop, waiting for the final gurgle and plug hole schlup. Once dried, puffy young arms tug a reluctant bath mat suction cups, flesh-dense rubber stuck fast to white enamel, an oblong of non-slip blancmange pink, tearing pop-pop-pops until, finally, pulled free, leaving a grid of light dirt rings to be rinsed off later, returning the bathtub to neutral territory. So, yeah, so poetry is another thing, another way of looking at the world and showing things that aren't in my work. That was the cover. I meant to show that. And if you don't want to see what the sailor looks like, there he is with his orange rosy cheeks. Oh, there you go. So exciting. So I don't know if you ever get emails like this, but it usually means, to me, an exciting opportunity means somebody wants to do a project with me and not pay me any money. So, and this wasn't quite that, but it was a company called Newspaper Club got in touch, who'd been to the talk I'd done in Glasgow last year and said, oh, would you like to do a newspaper with us? And we'll pay you a little bit. And then I sent them this saying I'd been working on work that I hadn't shown anybody, and I was trying to loosen up even further, but bring in all the different elements of what I do. And I said, can I do something using this kind of way of working? And I went, yeah. And I said, okay, I'll do it then. And then it ended up, this was the cover. So the idea was me trying to just push beyond how I normally work, but keep all the elements there. And I had this phrase, which was time to unstick the stuck. I was feeling that we're in the culture, like the doldrums creatively, and wanted to push past it. I had this typeface I did probably 13 years ago, and I hadn't really used. So I brought that in, made it 3D, bitmapped it. And then I started using the flourishes, and I started layering things and adding elements that are, hiding things in there. That says I'll look to the future through a visit to the past. Typography using the French curves, some writing. The Beauty of the Flowers was never made for us. The kids' camera, which I'm obsessed with, and then me, and then the mask of my own face. And then I ended up being in the ad campaign with them, which was quite strange. So, and then the stuff I've been doing now, which is the kind of giving it all you got stuff, I've brought it all together, and I've been working on it for a few months, but I haven't been showing anybody, and it's something quite strange in the modern world not to show people stuff. So this is one of the early ones I did, and it's obviously got "Let's Give It All We've Got," which is the thing I've been writing, and it's got the manifesto at the bottom. And for me, this feels very, very different to the way I work. It feels much more like painting, or even like doing the poetry. When I'm normally making my work, I can imagine the end result, but these I can't, and I'm putting things in and taking things away, and there's a point when it all comes together. And I'm also imagining them as 50 by 70 big posters, so I can play around with scale in a way that I don't normally. And this is another one. This says, what future do we want to live in? And it's got all the different elements of what I've been playing around with. So if you go up to the top, there's the flourishes, but then the lettering's been made with the French, because me, obviously. And there's lots of smiley faces, but there's my kind of signature work in there as well. I'm not casting anything out. I'm putting everything in there. Using typefaces, like this was like a typeface, well, not this one, but there was one in Good for Nothing that was similar, but I've gone back to that. Like a charities, as human a thing to draw as a face. Up at the top there, there's sketchbooks from nearly 30 years ago where I've been drawing chairs. This was like an idea for a chair Kama Sutra that I never did, and that's me in about 2000. Well, in the 90s, that was what I did. And the kids thing, but that was the maquette of a chair that I did about 10 years ago. And this is about as far as I've pushed it. This says crying is normal sometimes, and there's lots of tears on here. And there's the highlight says that, and there's the tears with tears. So I'm just pushing things. I have no idea. It's probably not very commercially advantageous for me. I haven't, but once I put it out there, we'll see. This started off as a self-portrait. Obviously, wasn't in the end. So again, I don't know where these things are going. It has all these different elements in there. It ended up being something completely different to what I imagined it. But it says you can never know what it is I'm thinking, which is true, and it's about the theory of mind. But then there's irreverent things in there, like will Wigsby ever back in faction? And he hopes so, but the triangle says I don't. And so I've been printing these out on my little A4 printer, sticking them up in my studio, and been surrounded and living with these things to see what to do with them. And I've been doing all these things, and I say I haven't shown anybody them yet, but it's going to happen soon. And I'm having fun if nobody else is. So finally, it was just wanting to go back to this idea of where we're going to do in the future. What future do we want to live in, and what do we want it to look like? I think about these things a lot, and but nobody seems to be talking. People talk about AI and things like that, but they don't really talk about the work. I'm more interested in how things look and the end result than pretty much how it's made. I don't really think we're going to be all wearing glasses. I can't imagine that. And if we are, am I going to be this guy there? There he is. I didn't. No, that was Chance one. And then to bring it all back to the very beginning, this is the book I was talking about with Marcus McLuhan and Quentin Fury. It's a great book. It covers the worst bit of it, but the actual inside is it's all very relevant to now. The meaning is in the massage, not message, which people think it says. And there's this great line: there is absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what is happening. And like humans are idiots, but I'm included myself in that. But I think it's important that we are idiots. Because every step towards the purely logical is a step away from what it is to be human towards a world more suitable for computers. So we need to be better at being harder, and let's not lose our strange humanity. Thank you. I mean, if you can be bothered, I have a song as well. Jesus Christ. I started doing songs at the end of my talk. Years ago, I did a talk at Glasgow College, a School of Art, and it was an evening talk, and it was just me. I thought it needs to be more entertaining. And nobody asks you what you're doing, so I thought I'll just do a silly talk. And it went a silly song, and it went down well. And now people expect it, but it was also a way of ending the talk. But now I have to end it and then say, oh, and that's not the end. And it becomes even more, it's more awkward than if I just finished and do the song. Anyway, this is about it involves moving. It's called New Shapes. And this is the end, I guarantee, I promise. And there might be something that sounds a little bit like beatboxing, but it's not, because I'm a 54-year-old man who shouldn't be doing things like that. Like that. Here we go. La 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 la. Like sometimes you question your life choices. Right? I like squares. I like triangles too. Circles are my favorites. I'm looking for something new. I'm looking for the new shapes. I'm looking for the new shapes. I'm looking for the new shapes. Well, if you've seen them, can you show me? If you've heard of them, can you tell me? 'Cause I'm looking for the new shapes. I'm looking for the new shapes. Is this the definition of cringe? Yeah, if you've seen them, can you show me? If you've heard of them, can you tell me? I'm looking for the new shapes. I'm looking for the new shapes. New shapes. New shapes. New shapes, new shapes, new shapes, new shapes. Oh, la, la, oh. Thank you.
Yes, you too.